The council chamber aboard the luminous refuge hummed with a faint dying light. Commander Syleth stood before the circular table, where 7 other Varys sat, their crystalline bodies refracting the dim emergency lighting into weak rainbows on the metal walls. 300 cycles of running had brought them to this moment, and Syleth could see the exhaustion in every fractured edge of her people's forms. "We have 6 lunar cycles left," she said, her voice resonating through the chamber like wind through crystal chimes. "Perhaps less. The life support systems are failing faster than our engineers can repair them." Elder Moraeth, the oldest among them, shifted his ancient frame. Cracks ran through his body, like rivers, testament to the centuries he had lived. "We knew this day would come, Commander. We have asked everyone. The answer is always no." Syleth felt the weight of those refusals like stones in her chest. The Corinthian Empire had turned their generation ship away from their borders, with weapons locked and ready to fire. They claimed resource scarcity, though their worlds were fat with abundance. The Telos Federation had been more polite, but equally firm. They feared the Varys crystalline biology might interfere with their silicon-based technology. It did not matter that the Varys had offered to remain in orbit, to take nothing, to simply exist in the shadow of someone else's star. The gathering of free worlds had been worst of all. They had listened to the Varys plea, examined their situation with cold efficiency, and asked a single question: "What can you offer in trade?" The Varys had nothing. They were scholars and artists, philosophers and teachers. They had brought their books, their music, their 3,000 years of accumulated wisdom. None of it held value in the market of survival. "There must be somewhere," young Praith said from his station near the navigation console. At barely 40 cycles old, he still possessed an optimism that the others had long since abandoned. "Some world that will listen." "We have exhausted the civilized systems," Counselor Theris replied, her voice heavy with resignation. "What remains are the frontier worlds, the dangerous zones, the species not yet admitted to the Galactic Council." Syleth walked to the large viewport that dominated one wall of the chamber. Beyond the reinforced glass, she could see the stars streaming past as the luminous refuge continued its endless journey. Somewhere behind them, invisible now across the vast distances of space, was the expanding wound in reality they called the Cascade. It had consumed their homeworld of Vyros first, turning their beautiful crystal cities into dust and memory. Then it had spread, a chain reaction of collapsing stars triggered by some ancient weapon from a civilization dead before the Varys had learned to look up at the night sky. They had run. 40,000 souls packed into a ship designed for 20,000, fleeing ahead of the annihilation. For 300 cycles they had wandered, begging for sanctuary, offering everything they were in exchange for a simple place to exist. The galaxy had answered with closed doors and cold mathematics. "Commander," Praith said, his voice uncertain, "there is one more possibility." Syleth turned from the viewport. "Show me." The young navigator touched his controls, and a holographic display materialized above the council table. A small yellow star appeared, unremarkable among the billions that populated the galaxy. Orbiting it was a blue and green world, swirled with white clouds. "This system is designated Sol by its inhabitants," Praith explained. "The third planet is called Terra or Earth. It is inhabited by a pre-contact species. They have only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last 50 cycles. They are not part of the Galactic Council." "A pre-contact world?" Elder Moraith's voice carried clear disapproval. "The treaties forbid interference with developing civilizations." "The treaties also forbid allowing refugee populations to die when alternatives exist," Syleth said quietly. "What do we know about them?" Praith manipulated the display, and the image zoomed closer to the blue world. "They call themselves humans. Carbon-based, bilateral symmetry, relatively short-lived by our standards. They number approximately 9 billion on their homeworld, with another 2 billion scattered across their system, and a handful of nearby colonies. Military capability? Counselor Ferris asked. Significant, from what our long-range sensors detect. They seem to have a talent for weapons development. Their ship designs prioritize armament over efficiency, but they are also, Praith hesitated, searching for the right words. They are curious. When our passive sensors detected their communications, we found they broadcast messages into space, seeking contact. They seem to want to meet other species. Syleth studied the blue world. It looked peaceful from this distance, beautiful even, with its swirling oceans and green continents. She thought of Veros, of the crystal forests that had sung in the wind, of the cities that had grown like gardens from the living stone of their world, all gone now, consumed by the cascade. They will likely refuse us, Elder Moraith said. Why would a pre-contact species take on such a burden? Because we have no other choice, Syleth replied. And perhaps, because they do not yet know that the civilized thing to do is say no. The council debated through the night cycle and into the day. Some argued that approaching a pre-contact species was too dangerous. Humans might be aggressive, might see the luminous refuge as a threat or an opportunity for exploitation. Others countered that the Viheris were dying regardless, and at least this way they died trying rather than drifting through empty space as their ship failed around them. In the end, Syleth made the decision. She was the commander. The burden was hers to carry. Set course for Earth, she ordered. Prepare a first contact package. Everything we are, everything we have survived, everything we hope for. We will show them the truth of our situation, and pray they have compassion where others had only fear. The luminous refuge turned slowly in the darkness of space, its ancient engines straining to change course. The ship groaned with the effort, metal crying out against metal, systems pushed far beyond their designed limits. But it moved, reorienting toward the distant yellow star that represented their final chance. As the ship accelerated, Syleth remained at the viewport, watching the stars shift. Somewhere ahead, on a world they had never seen, among a species they had never met, their fate would be decided. She thought of her people sleeping in the refugee decks below, of the children who had known nothing but the inside of this ship, of the elders whose memories held the last fragments of their lost world. Commander, Praith said softly, coming to stand beside her. What if they say no? Syleth reached out and placed her hand against the cold glass. Her crystalline palm glowed faintly with the last reserves of her bioluminescence, a spark of light against the infinite dark. Then we will have tried. And perhaps that will be enough. The luminous refuge sailed on through the night, carrying its cargo of hope and desperation toward a blue world that did not yet know 40,000 souls were coming to ask for the most precious gift in all the galaxy, a place to call home. The United Earth Space Command detected the luminous refuge 3 days before it reached the outer boundary of the Sol system. Secretary General Maria Chen received the alert in the middle of the night, pulled from sleep by her security detail, and rushed to the command center deep beneath New Geneva. It's big, Admiral Torres said, pulling up the scan data on the main display. Nearly 2 kilometers long, but the power signatures are wrong. It's running on maybe 20% of what a ship that size should need. Chen studied the image. The alien vessel looked like a massive crystal flower frozen in metal, its hull covered in geometric patterns that caught and reflected the distant starlight. Are weapons armed? No, ma'am. In fact, we're not detecting any weapons at all. It's broadcasting on multiple frequencies, but we can't translate it yet. Linguists are working on it now. Chen made her decision quickly. Send a hail. Standard first contact protocols. No aggressive posture, but keep the defense fleet ready. and get me Dr. Okafor. If this is real, we'll need our best xenobiologist. The translation came through 6 hours later, just as the alien ship entered orbit around Neptune. The message was simple and heartbreaking. We are the Varus. We are dying. We seek sanctuary. Please respond. Chen convened an emergency session of the World Council. Representatives from every nation appeared on screens around the chamber, and the arguments began immediately. Russia wanted to deny entry, citing security concerns. China proposed allowing limited contact for technology exchange. The African Union urged caution but compassion. The North American Federation was split, with hardliners demanding quarantine and progressives pushing for humanitarian aid. They could be a threat, the Russian representative argued. We know nothing about them. They're asking for help, Chen countered. Their message is desperate. They're not invading. They're begging. And if this is a trick, came the reply, humanity has barely left our own solar system. We cannot afford to take risks. The debate raged for hours, while the luminous refuge waited in the cold orbit of Neptune, sending its plea over and over into the silence. Chen listened to every argument, weighed every concern, and thought about the images the linguists had managed to extract from the alien transmissions. Faces, if they could be called that, made of crystal and light. Children, undeniably children despite their alien form, with huge eyes and thin frames, suffering that transcended species. We send a delegation, Chen finally declared. Captain Morrison will lead it. Dr. Okafor will accompany him to assess their biological needs. They will board the alien vessel, establish communication, and report back. Then we decide. The vote passed narrowly. 3 days later, Captain James Morrison found himself boarding a shuttle bound for the most important meeting in human history. Morrison was a veteran of the colonial expansion, a man who had seen the beauty and terror of space in equal measure. He had fought in the Mars independence conflict, had established the first settlements beyond Neptune, had lost friends to the vacuum and the cold, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of the luminous refuge up close. The ship was dying. Even his untrained eye could see it. Hull breaches were patched with material that did not match. Entire sections were dark and cold, and the docking bay they entered looked like it had been repaired 1,000 times with whatever the crew could find. The Vieras who met them were like nothing Morrison had imagined. They moved with a grace that seemed almost liquid, their crystalline bodies refracting the light into colors he had no names for. But there was fragility there too, cracks in their forms, a dimness to their inner glow that spoke of exhaustion beyond measure. Commander Syleth introduced herself through a translation device that turned her chiming voice into accented but clear English. Thank you for coming. We did not expect even this courtesy. Dr. Amara Okafor stepped forward, her scanner already out. Commander, we need to understand your biology to help you. May I? Syleth extended her arm, and Okafor began her examination. Morrison watched the doctor's face shift from curiosity to concern to something like horror as she reviewed the readings. Captain, Okafor said quietly, they're starving. Their biology processes specific wavelengths of light for nutrition, but their ship's systems can't produce enough anymore. The children especially, they're eating their own reserves. Morrison felt something twist in his chest. He had 2 kids back on Earth, both teenagers now, both safe and fed and warm. He thought of them going hungry while he stood by and watched. How many of you are there? He asked. 40,000, Syleth replied. Once we were 80,000, but the journey has been long, and we have lost many. Where are you from? Morrison asked. Syleth led them through the ship, and Morrison saw the truth of their situation with every step. Overcrowded living spaces where families huddled together for warmth. Medical bays filled with the sick and dying. Schools where children studied by the light of failing systems, learning about a homeworld they would never see. In a chamber that served as both memorial and museum, Syleth showed them images of Veros. Crystal cities that grew from living stone, forests that sang in harmonics humans could barely hear, oceans that glowed with bioluminescent life. Then she showed them the cascade, the expanding wave of stellar collapse that had consumed it all. We ran, Syleth said simply. For 300 cycles we have run. We have asked every species, every civilization, every government we encountered for shelter. All have refused. When we detected your world, we knew approaching a pre-contact species violated numerous treaties. But we are dying, Captain Morrison, and the dead do not care about treaties. Morrison looked at Dr. Okafor. The xenobiologist's eyes were wet with tears she was not trying to hide. He thought about Earth's history, about the refugee crises he had learned about in school, about his own grandmother, who had fled violence in Syria a century ago. He thought about what it meant to turn away someone who had nowhere left to go. I need to report back to Earth, he said, but Commander Syleth, I want you to know something. I'm going to recommend we help you. I can't promise what my government will decide, but I promise I'll fight for you. Syleth's inner light brightened slightly, the first sign of hope Morrison had seen from her. Why? You do not know us. We have nothing to offer you. Morrison smiled sadly. Because it's the right thing to do, because we know what it's like to be desperate, and because no one should die alone in the dark when there's someone who can help. The return shuttle ride was quiet. Okafor compiled her medical data while Morrison composed his report. When they docked at Earth's command station, Chen was waiting. Well, she asked. They're dying, Morrison said bluntly. They're refugees from a stellar catastrophe. They've been wandering for 300 years, and every government in the galaxy has turned them away. We can help them, Madam Secretary. The question is whether we will. Chen looked at the data Okafor had prepared, at the images Morrison had captured, at the translation of Syleth's testimony. She thought about the political cost, the economic burden, the risks both known and unknown. Then she thought about the kind of species humanity wanted to be, now that they had finally reached the stars. Schedule an emergency World Council session, she said. We're going to do this right. And Captain Morrison, I want you there. If I have to convince them, they need to hear from someone who's looked these people in the eye. The debate that followed would last for days and consume every news cycle on Earth. But in the end, swayed by Morrison's testimony and images of Varys children too weak to stand, the vote passed. Earth would grant temporary sanctuary to the Luminous Refuge, providing humanitarian aid while the refugees repaired their ship and searched for a permanent home. When Chen transmitted the news to Commander Syleth, the Varys commander's light blazed so bright it overloaded the communication system for a moment. Through the static, Morrison heard her voice, raw with emotion, speaking words he would remember for the rest of his life. You have given us what the galaxy's most powerful civilizations would not. You have given us hope. We will remember this, Captain Morrison. We will remember what humanity chose to be. 3 months after the Luminous Refuge entered Earth's orbit, Prayat stood on the observation deck of the lunar station and watched Earth turn slowly below. The blue world still amazed him, so different from the images of Veros preserved in the archives. Where his homeworld had been crystalline and geometric, Earth was organic and chaotic, covered in water and clouds and green growing things. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice said beside him. Prayat turned to find a young human woman about his age, or what passed for his age in human terms. She had dark skin and kind eyes, and wore a visitor's badge that identified her as Sophia Chen. Yes, Prayat agreed, very different from home. I'm sorry about your world, Sophia said. I read about the cascade. I can't imagine losing everything like that. Prayat's inner light dimmed slightly. Most of my generation never saw Veros. We were born on the ship. Just stories now. Sophia gestured to the cafeteria area. Want some coffee? Or, well, whatever you drink. I'm supposed to be touring the station for my grandmother, but honestly, talking to you is way more interesting than looking at life support systems. Over the next weeks, Praith and Sophia became friends. She showed him Earth through video calls and virtual tours, explaining human culture with the enthusiasm of someone who loved her world. He learned about Earth's diversity, hundreds of cultures and languages and ways of life, all crammed onto one small planet. How do you not fight all the time? Praith asked during one of their conversations. Sophia laughed, though there was darkness in it. Oh, we fight. We've had wars that killed millions. We've done terrible things to each other. But we also have this thing where we keep trying to be better. We keep failing and trying again. She showed him the historical archives, and Praith spent hours reading about humanity's refugee crises, the Syrian diaspora of the early 21st century, the climate migrations that followed, the Mars colony rebellions, and the subsequent peace accords. Humans had a long history of displacement and suffering, of closing doors and opening them, of fear and courage in equal measure. That's why my grandmother pushed so hard to help you, Sophia explained. Her own grandmother was a refugee. She knew what it meant when Earth said yes to your people. But not all of Earth had said yes. As the Varys settled into their temporary habitats on the moon and in orbital stations, tensions began to rise. The economic cost was higher than projected. Adapting Earth's technology to Varys biology proved challenging and expensive. Some nations that had voted for sanctuary began to regret their choice. Praith saw the protests on the news feeds, angry humans carrying signs demanding the aliens leave. Politicians giving speeches about Earth's resources being wasted on strangers. There were incidents too, growing more frequent and more violent. A Varys scholar named Kelrith was attacked in Mumbai while visiting a university. The attackers had shattered parts of his crystalline form with hammers before security intervened. 3 human aid workers were threatened in Sao Paulo for their support of the refugees. I'm sorry, Sophia said when Praith mentioned the incidents. Some people are scared. They don't understand that helping you doesn't hurt them. Perhaps they are right to be scared, Praith replied quietly. We have brought nothing but burden to your world. Don't say that. You've brought knowledge, art, a completely different way of seeing the universe. Yesterday, I went to a concert where human musicians collaborated with Varys lightshapers. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. But the situation worsened when a Varys deep space monitoring ship arrived with devastating news. The cascade was expanding faster than predicted, accelerating as it consumed more stellar mass. It was now approaching the core systems of the Galactic Council, threatening hundreds of civilized worlds. The Council's response was immediate and aggressive. They sent a fleet to Earth's solar system with a simple demand: surrender the Varys for interrogation. The Council believed the refugees might possess knowledge about the ancient weapon that had triggered the cascade, information that could help stop it. Earth's refusal to comply would be considered an act of war against the civilized galaxy. Secretary General Chen called Commander Syleth to her office in New Geneva, one of the rare times a Varys had been permitted on Earth's surface. Praith accompanied his commander, his first time actually setting foot on the blue world. The gravity felt different, heavier than the ship or the lunar station. The air tasted strange, full of scents he had no reference for. But what struck him most was the color. Earth was so full of color, from the green plants that grew everywhere to the blue sky overhead. In Chen's office, the situation was laid out clearly. The Galactic Council is demanding I hand you over, Chen said. They've given us 1 week to comply, or they'll enforce their demand with military force. Syleth stood silent for a long moment, her light pulsing slowly. I will not allow Earth to suffer for showing us kindness. No, Chen said firmly. We don't negotiate with threats, and we don't abandon people who've asked for our protection. That's not who we are. Madam Secretary, your world has done more for us than we ever deserved. But we are 40,000 refugees. Earth has 9 billion souls. The mathematics are clear. The mathematics don't matter, Chen replied. What matters is whether we're the kind of species that abandons people when things get difficult. My answer to the Galactic Council is no. Earth stands with the virus. Praith felt his entire being resonate with emotion at those words. Sophia, standing nearby, smiled at him with tears in her eyes. But the weight of that decision settled heavy on everyone. Earth's military began preparations for a conflict they could not win. The Galactic Council had thousands of ships, advanced weapons, and the combined might of dozens of civilized species. Earth had barely 100 military vessels, most of them repurposed exploration ships. Captain Morrison convened with his officers to develop defense strategies. We make them pay for every inch, he said grimly. If they want to take the Viharis, they'll have to go through us first. In the Viharis habitats, a different kind of preparation was taking place. Syleth gathered her best scientists and engineers in a secret meeting. Among them was Kelrith, the physician who had been attacked in Mumbai, his body still showing cracks from the assault. We cannot let Earth fight our battle, Syleth said, but we may have another option. For 300 cycles, we have studied the cascade, trying to understand what caused it. I believe we know how to stop it, but the solution requires entering the cascade itself. That would be suicide, one of the scientists objected. Yes, Syleth agreed, but if we succeed, we save not just Earth, but every world in the galaxy. And if we fail, at least we die trying to solve the problem we brought to humanity's door. The plan was desperate and dangerous, but it was a plan. They would need human technology combined with Varus knowledge, a ship capable of surviving the extreme conditions at the Cascade's origin point, and a crew willing to accept they would likely never return. Praith found himself volunteering before he fully understood what he was doing. Sophia tried to stop him, arguing that he had already lost enough, but he was firm. Earth took us in when no one else would, he said. Your people are willing to die defending us. How can I do less? Sophia hugged him, and Praith experienced the strange sensation of human warmth. Come back, she whispered. Please come back. The Corinthian battle fleet was detected at the edge of the solar system on the 6th day. Admiral Torres reported they would reach Earth in 48 hours. Chen stood in the command center, watching the tactical display show the overwhelming force arrayed against them. We're buying time, she said to her staff. Time for the Viharis to prepare their mission. If they can stop the cascade, this fleet becomes irrelevant. The Council will have no reason to take them. And if the mission fails? Torres asked. Then we fight, Chen replied. And we show the galaxy that Earth doesn't abandon its friends. On the lunar station, Syleth stood before her volunteer crew, humans and Viharis together, preparing to attempt the impossible. She thought about the 300 cycles of wandering, of rejection after rejection, of slowly dying in the cold dark between stars. She thought about Earth's inexplicable kindness, about humans who barely knew them choosing to stand and fight. We go into the cascade, she said, her voice resonating through the chamber. We go knowing we may not return, but we go because Earth showed us that courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to act despite it. They stood for us. Now we stand for everyone. The mission ship, a hybrid of human engineering and Viharis technology, launched from the moon under cover of Earth's defensive preparations. Praith took one last look at the blue world through the viewport, at Sophia standing with her grandmother on the command deck, watching them go. The cascade waited ahead, a wound in space, slowly devouring the galaxy, and somewhere behind them, a fleet approached to take them away from the first real home they had known in 300 years. The Corinthian blockade, settled into position around Earth's solar system like a noose tightening. Admiral Torres watched from the command deck as the enemy fleet established their perimeter, cutting off all trade routes and diplomatic channels. Earth was alone, isolated from the galactic community they had just barely joined. "It's complete," Torres reported to Secretary General Chen. "No ships in or out. They're serious about this." Chen stood at the window of her office, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, the mission ship was racing toward the Cascade. Somewhere else, the Corinthian fleet waited to enforce the Council's demands. And here on Earth, humanity held its breath. "How long can we sustain this?" she asked. "Economically, we'll manage. We were never that dependent on galactic trade yet. Militarily, if they decide to enforce their demands by force, we'll last maybe 3 days. Then we'd better make those 3 days count." But something unexpected was happening. In the weeks since the blockade began, Earth and the Vaheris had not grown apart in fear. Instead, they had grown closer. With no external support to rely on, the two species began to truly integrate. In the lunar habitats, Vaheris engineers worked alongside human technicians to solve power distribution problems. The Vaheris' crystalline biology processed solar radiation in ways human scientists had never imagined. When a young Vaheris named Thalys explained their natural light harvesting mechanisms, human engineers suddenly understood how to revolutionize Earth's entire energy grid. "It's brilliant," Dr. Sarah Kim from the Tokyo Energy Institute said, studying the biological data. "They essentially grow solar cells as part of their body structure. If we can replicate this artificially, we could increase solar panel efficiency by 300%. The Vaheris, in turn, were learning from humanity. Their species had spent millennia pursuing pacifism and philosophical enlightenment, which had made them beautiful but also vulnerable. Humans showed them that survival sometimes required adaptation, that strength and compassion were not opposites. Physician Kelrith, still recovering from his attack in Mumbai, found himself working closely with Dr. Amara Okafor. Together, they made a breakthrough that would change both species. Kelrith's biology could neutralize certain types of radiation that were deadly to humans, a natural defense developed on Varos's radiation-rich environment. "This is incredible," Okafor said, reviewing the test results. "If we can synthesize this compound, we could protect human colonists in environments that are currently too dangerous. This could open up dozens of worlds to settlement." "And your agricultural techniques," Kelrith replied, examining the nutrient solutions Okafor had developed. "They have ended our food shortage entirely. For the first time in 300 cycles, our children are not hungry." The collaboration spread to unexpected areas. Human artists discovered that Vaheris light shaping could create entirely new forms of visual expression. Musicians found that Vaheris harmonic resonance could produce sounds that human instruments could never achieve. In New Shanghai, a joint art exhibition featured pieces that were simultaneously human painting and Vaheris light sculpture, creating four-dimensional works that changed as viewers moved around them. Sophia Chen spent most of her free time at the lunar station now, despite her grandmother's concerns about safety. She was learning Vaheris light language, a complex system of communication that used color and frequency instead of sound. It was difficult, requiring her to perceive subtleties human eyes were barely equipped to see, but she was determined. "Why do you work so hard at this?" her human teacher asked. "The translation devices work fine." "Because Praith is out there, risking his life to save all of us," Sophia replied. "When he comes back, I want to be able to tell him welcome home in his own language." But not everyone shared the growing warmth between species. On Earth, the protests continued. Senator Marcus Webb from the North American Federation had made opposition to the Vaheris his primary platform, and his support was growing. "We are under blockade because of them," Webb declared in a televised speech. Our economy suffers, our security is threatened, our children's future is in jeopardy, all for 40,000 aliens who give us nothing in return. Chen watched the speech from her office. Kelrith, sitting across from her. The Varus physician had requested this meeting personally. He is not wrong, Kelrith said quietly. We have brought hardship to Earth. Perhaps it would be better if we surrendered ourselves to the Council. Surely, your people's suffering is worth more than our survival. Don't ever say that again, Chen replied sharply. You want to know what the Varus have given us? You've given us a chance to prove what humanity can be. For 300 years your people wandered and were turned away by civilizations that called themselves advanced. They looked at the math and decided you weren't worth the cost. We looked at the math and decided the math didn't matter. She stood and walked to her window. Every species in the galaxy is watching us now, Kelrith. They're watching to see if the primitive humans will crack under pressure. If we'll give you up to save ourselves. And when we don't, when we stand firm and honor our commitments, we teach the galaxy a lesson it desperately needs to learn. What lesson is that? That civilization isn't about technology or power. It's about the choices you make when those choices are hard. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from Admiral Torres. Madam Secretary, you need to see this. The display showed long-range sensor data from the edge of the solar system. The Corinthian fleet was powering up weapons. They were preparing to advance. How long do we have? Chen asked. 12 hours, maybe less. They're sending a final ultimatum. Surrender the Varus, or they will take them by force. Chen looked at Kelrith. You should return to the lunar station. Get your people ready to evacuate to the far side of the moon. It won't save you, but it might buy time. And you? Kelrith asked. If we're going to fight, Earth should know why. That evening, every screen on Earth showed Secretary General Chen's address. She stood alone, without notes, speaking directly to the 9 billion souls who shared her world. Tomorrow, we may face war, she began. Not because we sought it, not because we threatened anyone, but because we made a choice. We chose to help people who had nowhere else to go. We chose compassion over convenience. We chose to be the species that opens doors instead of closing them. Some say this was foolish. Some say 40,000 refugees are not worth the cost. But I say this, every single one of you is descended from people who fled something. War, famine, disaster, persecution. At some point, every human alive today comes from someone who needed shelter, and someone else who provided it. The Galactic Council tells us to abandon the Varus. They say we are too primitive to understand the cost of our decision. But I believe it is they who do not understand. They have forgotten what it means to measure the worth of a soul. They have forgotten that civilization is built not on power, but on principles. Tomorrow we may fight, we may lose, but we will lose knowing we stood for something that matters. We will lose knowing that when the galaxy needed someone to remember what it means to be civilized, it was humanity, primitive humanity, that stepped forward. The Vaharis came to us with nothing. They asked for sanctuary, and we gave it. Now we stand together, human and Vaharis, facing whatever comes. And when this is over, regardless of the outcome, the galaxy will remember that Earth kept its promises. The speech resonated across the planet. Support for the Vaharis surged. Volunteers flooded military recruitment centers. On the lunar station, humans and Ferris worked side by side, preparing defenses they knew would not be enough. Kelrith found himself in the medical bay, organizing supplies, when a group of human medical students appeared. We're staying, their leader, a young woman named Rachel, announced. If the fleet comes, you'll need every doctor you can get. Human or Ferris, we take care of our own. In orbit above Earth, Captain Morrison's fleet took up defensive positions. They were outnumbered 20-1, outgunned by factors they could barely calculate. But every ship flew both the Earth flag and a new banner, one showing a human hand and a ferrous crystalline appendage clasped together. "All ships, this is Morrison," the captain broadcast. "I won't lie to you. Tomorrow looks bad. We're facing the most powerful military force in the galaxy, with ships held together by duct tape and hope. But we're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting for the right of people to live without fear, the right of refugees to find shelter, the right to be the kind of species that keeps its word. So hold your positions, do your duty, and remember that whatever happens up here tomorrow, Earth is watching. Let's give them something to be proud of." As the Corinthian fleet began its final approach, something extraordinary happened on Earth. Cities that had been divided by protests united in solidarity. Humans and Vaharis gathered together in public squares, waiting for news. In New Geneva's Central Plaza, Sophia Chen stood with a group of Vahari's children, teaching them human songs. In Mumbai, the community organized a vigil for Kelrith, the physician who had been attacked but chose to stay and help. High above, on the lunar observation deck where they had first met, a memorial hologram showed images from happier times. Praith and Sophia, laughing together. Human children playing with various light sculptures. Scientists from both species celebrating their discoveries. The timer counted down, 12 hours, 10, 8. The Corinthian fleet advanced, weapons charged, ready to enforce the Council's will. Earth's defense fleet held position, hopelessly outnumbered, but unwaveringly resolute. And somewhere in deep space, racing against time itself, the mission ship approached the heart of the Cascade, carrying the last desperate hope that none of this would matter, that the threat itself could be stopped before the shooting started. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if primitive humanity would break, if they would surrender the refugees to save themselves. What the galaxy did not understand was that humanity had already made their choice. They had made it the moment they said yes to the luminous refuge. They had made it when they looked at 40,000 desperate souls and saw people worth saving. The dawn came, the fleet approached, and Earth stood ready. The mission ship, Unity's Hope, shuddered as it entered the outer regions of the Cascade. Commander Sileth gripped her console, watching the sensor displays show reality itself beginning to break down around them. Beside her, Captain Morrison checked the status of their quantum disruption device, the desperate gamble that might save the galaxy or kill them all. "Radiation levels increasing," Dr. Okafor called from her station. "Still within tolerance, but barely." "Temporal distortion detected," Praith added, his voice tight with concentration. "The Cascade is affecting time itself here. We're experiencing minor time dilation." The crew of Unity's Hope was small, just 20 volunteers, split evenly between human and Varus. Each had known the odds when they signed up. Mission analysts gave them a 15% chance of reaching the Cascade's origin point, a 5% chance of successfully deploying the device, less than 1% chance of surviving to return home. But here they were anyway, diving into the heart of a stellar apocalypse, because it was the right thing to do. "How's our timeline?" Morrison asked. Sileth checked the chronometer. "The Corinthian fleet will reach Earth in 4 hours. We need to succeed before then, or this becomes pointless." The ship groaned as they pushed deeper into the Cascade. Space here was wounded, torn by the ancient weapon that had triggered this chain reaction 300 years ago. Stars collapsed in slow motion, their death throes stretched across decades of distorted time. The very fabric of reality rippled like water. "I've identified the origin point," Praith announced. "It's a quantum singularity, artificially stabilized. Whatever weapon caused this, it created a perpetual feedback loop. Each collapsing star feeds energy back into the singularity, which causes more collapses." "Can we stop it?" Morrison asked. "If we can deploy the disruption device directly into the singularity, it should break the feedback loop, but we'll need to get within 100 meters. The stress on the ship will probably tear us apart. Morrison finished. Yeah, I figured. Helm, take us in. The Unity's Hope dove toward the origin point, a writhing knot of broken physics that hurt to look at. The ship's hull began to scream, metal straining beyond its design limits. Warning alarms blared from every station. Hull breach on Deck 3, someone called out. Containment fields holding, another voice responded. Radiation at critical levels. I'm dosing everyone with inhibitors, Okafor said, moving quickly with her medical kit. Syleth watched the distance to the singularity tick down. 95 meters. 90. The ship was shaking itself apart around them. She thought about the luminous refuge, about 40,000 souls waiting in Earth's orbit, about Sophia Chen teaching Vihara's children human songs while the Corinthian fleet approached. She thought about Earth's impossible kindness, about a species barely out of its own solar system choosing to stand against the galaxy for people they barely knew. We're not going to make it, the helm officer said, his voice strained. The gravitational stress is too much. The engines are failing. Morrison looked at Syleth. In his eyes, she saw the same determination she felt, the same refusal to accept defeat. They had come too far, sacrificed too much. Earth deserved better than their failure. Okafor, Morrison said, how much radiation can we survive if we dump all power to the engines? No shields, no containment, everything to thrust. You'd die in minutes, maybe less. But we'd get close enough to deploy the device? Okafor hesitated, then nodded. Probably, but there's no coming back from that. Morrison turned to his crew. Human and Varys faces looked back at him, scared but resolute. I won't order this. Anyone who wants to stay behind in the escape pods, do it now. No judgment, no shame. You've already done more than anyone could ask. No one moved. Prey spoke up, his voice steady. Captain, we all volunteered knowing this was likely. Earth stood for us. Now we stand for everyone. Do it. Morrison nodded slowly. Helm, divert all power to engines. Syleth, prepare the device for manual deployment. Everyone else, hold on. The ship lurched forward as shields dropped, and all available power fed the engines. Radiation flooded in immediately, invisible but deadly. Okafor started administering what treatments she could, but they all knew it was just buying minutes. The singularity grew larger in the view screen, a wound in the universe, bleeding chaos and destruction. 70 meters, 60, 50. Syleth moved to the deployment bay with Morrison, both already feeling the radiation sickness beginning. Her crystalline structure was cracking. Morrison's skin was reddening with burns. Almost there, Morrison said through gritted teeth. Just a little further. At 30 meters, the ship's structural integrity finally gave out. A massive section of the hull tore away, exposing the interior to the raw chaos of the cascade. Syleth felt her body begin to fracture, centuries of age compressed into seconds. Morrison's hair was falling out, his hands shaking. Now, Syleth shouted. Together they activated the manual deployment system, the quantum disruption device launched from the dying ship, accelerating toward the singularity. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the device reached the exact center of the origin point and detonated. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The feedback loop broke, the artificial stabilization collapsed, and the singularity began to seal itself. The cascade, starved of its sustaining energy, started to reverse. Throughout the affected region, dying stars began to stabilize, the chain reaction running backward. On the bridge of the Unity's Hope, what was left of the crew watched the readings confirm their success. They had done it. The cascade was stopping. Send the signal, Morrison ordered, his voice barely a whisper. Let Earth know, we won. The transmission burst outward at faster-than-light speeds, carrying the news across the galaxy. The threat was over. Aboard the Unity's Hope, the crew began to fail. The radiation damage was too severe, the exposure too long. But they had succeeded. They had saved billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. Silaeth looked at Morrison, saw the human captain smiling despite the pain. "Not bad," Morrison said, "for a primitive species and some refugees." Silaeth's light flared one last time, bright and defiant. "Not bad at all." The transmission reached Earth just as the Corinthian fleet entered attack range. Admiral Torres received the data burst and immediately broadcast it to the enemy fleet. The cascade was stopped. The mission had succeeded. There was no more reason for conflict. The Corinthian fleet halted, their weapons still charged, while their commanders verified the data. Long minutes passed. Then, slowly, the fleet began to power down. The threat that had driven them to Earth's doorstep no longer existed. On the lunar station, Sophia Chen collapsed in relief when she heard the news. The cascade was stopped. Earth was safe. The fleet would withdraw. But then she learned the cost. The mission crew had succeeded, but they were not coming home. The Unity's hope had been found by a Council rescue ship, drifting in the cascade's remains. Of the 20 crew members, 18 were dead from radiation exposure. Only 2 survived. Dr. Okafor, barely, and Commander Silaeth, her crystalline body so fractured and damaged that she had aged centuries in hours. Morrison was gone. Praith was gone. Most of the brave souls who had volunteered for the impossible mission were gone. But they had saved everyone. The funeral was held on Earth, in the same plaza where humans and Varys had gathered to wait for news. Representatives from the Galactic Council attended, humbled and ashamed. They had sent a fleet to threaten Earth, and Earth's response had been to save them all. The Council's High Chancellor, a being of pure energy named Vastreth, addressed the assembly. "The Council has failed. We judged the worth of souls by mathematics and found the Varys wanting. We called humanity primitive when they chose compassion over calculation. We threatened war when they honored their commitments. We were wrong about everything." Vastreth turned to the Varys delegation, to Commander Silaeth being carried on a support stretcher, her body too damaged to stand. "The Varys are granted full member status in the Galactic Council, under permanent protection of Earth. Any species that seeks sanctuary will be judged not by what they offer in trade, but by their need and our ability to help. This is the human way, and we adopt it as our own. Earth is granted immediate full council membership with a permanent seat on the High Council. You have taught us what civilization truly means." But the greatest moment came when Vastreth announced the Council's final decision. The Varys will be offered assistance in finding and terraforming a new homeworld. However, given their integration with humanity, they will also be offered the option to remain permanently within the Sol system as Earth citizens. Secretary General Chen took the podium, her eyes red from crying for Captain Morrison and all the others lost. "Earth extends citizenship to any Varys who wishes it. You are not refugees anymore. You are family." The decision split the Varys community. Some, particularly the elders, chose to establish a new colony world while maintaining close ties with Earth. They wanted to rebuild Varys culture, to have a world that was theirs. Others, especially the younger generation born on the luminous refuge, chose to stay. Earth was the only home they had ever known. Praith's family chose to stay. His younger sister accepted his posthumous honors, along with Sophia Chen, who had been named his next of kin in his final wishes. Through her tears, Sophia spoke in halting Varys light language, the words Praith had taught her. "Welcome home, friend of my heart. Your light shines eternal." Dr. Okafor recovered slowly, her body ravaged by radiation, but her spirit unbroken. She and Kelrith continued their research, developing treatments that would save countless lives of both species. Together, they established the Morrison Scythe Institute for Xenobiology, named for the captain who had believed in compassion and the commander who had believed in humans. Commander Scythe lived for 3 more years, long enough to see the first virus children born as Earth citizens, long enough to see humans and virus working together as equals throughout the Sol system. On her deathbed, she called Sophia Chen to her side. "I was there when we first detected your world," Scythe said, her light dim but steady. "I remember thinking it was madness to approach a pre-contact species. I was certain you would refuse us or destroy us, but you did neither. You took us in." "You saved us all," Sophia replied, holding the elder's crystalline hand gently. "The cascade would have consumed the galaxy. You stopped it." "No," Scythe corrected. "We stopped it together. That is the lesson, Sophia Chen. That is what humanity taught the galaxy. Together, we are unstoppable." Scythe's light faded slowly, peacefully. Her last words were simple. "Thank you for giving us a home." The funeral was attended by representatives from across the galaxy. The primitive species that everyone had dismissed, the refugees that everyone had rejected. Together they had done what the entire Galactic Council could not. They had saved civilization itself. Years later, Sophia Chen stood in the same observation deck where she had first met Praith. Earth turned below, but now it was surrounded by structures both human and Varus. The moon glowed with cities where both species lived and worked side by side. In orbit, mixed crews operated ships exploring the galaxy. She was older now, a xenologist like Praith had wanted to be, studying how different species could build shared futures. The answer, she had learned, was simple but profound. You started by opening your doors. You continued by keeping your promises. You succeeded by remembering that the measure of civilization was not in power, but in compassion. A young Vaheri student approached her, born on Earth, knowing no other home. "Dr. Chen, is it true that the galaxy almost went to war with Earth over us?" Sophia smiled. "Yes, and it's true that Earth said no. They chose to stand with the Vaheris, no matter the cost." "Why?" the student asked. "We had nothing to offer." Sophia looked out at the blue world below, at the thriving civilization that had grown from that simple choice to help. "Because you needed sanctuary, and Earth decided that was reason enough." The student's light pulsed with wonder. Sophia thought about Praith, about Morrison, about Scythe, and all the others who had given everything. They had proven that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or their technology. It was their refusal to turn away someone in need. The Vaheris had no place left until Earth took them in. And in doing so, Earth had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to be civilized. Not through power or threats, but through the simple, radical act of compassion. The stars above glowed steady and calm. The cascade was gone, just a memory now, a reminder of what had almost been lost and what had been saved. And in the space between those stars, humans and Varies traveled together, exploring the galaxy as equals, as friends, as family. The galaxy had learned its lesson. When someone has no place left, you take them in. Because that is what civilization means.